Hey, this is Mark, and this is episode 11 of the Why Are We Still Doing This podcast. This past August, I attended the very first Comic-Con in my life. First off, everyone at Comic-Con is weird. Everyone is weird, but extremely happy to be there. You're not going to find happier people than those dressed to their nines in their favorite video game / anime / sci-fi / pro wrestling costume than at a Comic-Con. I'd say the more obscure the costume / character, the happier the person is. It's a good weird. They know they're weird. They love being weird. This is, without a doubt, their time to shine. However, there are a lot of, I guess you could call them normal people, who look at Comic-Con and call it weird, like a bad weird. A bad weird as in childish, androgynous, less masculine, or even mentally ill. Surface level people will look at Comic-Con and be like, well, that's fucking weird. Yeah, it is weird. But I'd rather be weird than be like everyone else. The people who call it a bad weird can't understand it. It doesn't make sense to them. And that's fine. Doesn't have to. You know what's weird to me? Being a grown man and not being able to dress yourself, like wearing jeans to a wedding, pants that are way too big, and needing your wife to come to JCPenney with you because you don't know how to buy a suit. You know what's also weird? Hanging a Confederate flag in your house in 2025. Thinking same-sex couples shouldn't be allowed to get married. That's pretty weird. You know what's really weird? Dressing up like G.I. Joe and storming the Capitol. People at Comic-Con are not the people storming the Capitol. Everyone there is fucking happy. These are not the people who are recorded and posted on TikTok calling others racial slurs from their lifted Ford F-250. These are not the people protesting gay marriage. These are not people asking to speak to the manager. They are happy, weird people who are really open to anything and everything. And when they see something that doesn't fit their version of normal, they say, not my cup of tea. As opposed to the rage-filled outburst that a surface-level person who would have with something that goes against their normal. You could even say that getting emotionally invested in professional sports is weird. Cheering on grown men you have no relation to, sometimes painting your face, taking off your shirt in 30-degree weather to show your team spirit, that could be considered a little weird. Comic-Con is a happy place. Everyone is happy to be there. I'm reminded of the time I did stand-up at a gay bar roughly 13 years ago and how that environment was the complete opposite of every other bar experience I've ever had in my life up until then. I talked about this in my first bonus episode a few weeks back. I had been used to general small-town bars or larger nightclubs where men often fought for the hand of a young maiden, or because one guy was a Ford guy and the other was a Chevy guy, or just because they had too many shots of wild turkey. There was none of that at this gay bar, and I highly doubt there has ever been a bar fight in Provincetown, Massachusetts, which is a beautiful place, an LGBTQ sanctuary. Only been there once, but really nice. Anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is that Conservative, insecure, sometimes narcissistic men with maybe too much testosterone and feeling threatened by women and gay men are not going to a Comic-Con. The people who find Comic-Con a bad weird are the people that have these preconceived beliefs, particularly about men and women, that are both antiquated and just plain made up. Stuff like, it's my wife's job to have my supper ready at 6 p.m. Or, men don't cross their legs when they sit. Or, men don't use umbrellas when it's raining. Bad weird thinking comes from feeling threatened by something you don't understand. I want to be part of the good weird. The weird that's open to all kinds of weird. The weird that doesn't hurt anyone. Unless you accidentally hit someone in the face with a giant plastic sword, or axe, or lightsaber. But Comic-Con is the chance for introverts to finally be an extrovert and not have to worry about some guy named Cletus calling them a homophobic slur because they're wearing something that doesn't fit Cletus's version of normal. For some of those people, they would dress like a Jedi or some obscure anime character every day if they could. But sometimes they're afraid to walk out of the house because, depending on where they live, there's at least a dozen Cletuses waiting around the corner to give them a dirty look. This day, Comic-Con Day, is like Christmas for them. It's one day a year when they can just be themselves without fear or judgment. I can make fun of Comic-Con because I'm in it. I love that stuff. And if you can't make fun of yourself, then there's really no hope for you. I remember loading my drum set into a gig when I was in college, a place that was just off the main road from the university. And I'll never forget standing outside the venue in a crowd of 15 to 20 punk rock kids, all with colored mohawks, leather jackets, with spikes on them, and big shiny Doc Marten boots. And a minivan drives by with two teenagers from the college, I assume, and the driver sticks his head out the window and yells a homophobic slur toward us. Turns back to his friend, and they enjoy a good laugh. And at the time, I knew why they did that, but not to the depth I now understand. It's because we didn't fit their version of normal. These kids that heckled us pretty much fit the description of a preppy college kid. Polo shirt, white hat worn backwards, seashell necklace. This was 2001, mind you. They're probably now some hedge fund assholes that own remote-controlled golf carts, which I think are pretty cool, but are way too expensive and just a general white guy thing to do. But their goal was not to necessarily call us homosexual, but rather make us feel less of a man. And I guess when you peak in 8th grade, that is your best line to throw out when you feel threatened. Although I never dressed like anyone else in the band, I had no mohawk, no spiked leather jacket, no Doc Marten boots. But I could always appreciate people being themselves without fear of judgment. One of my friends in high school was asked to leave our local mall because he wore a leather jacket with spikes on it. Mind you, the spikes were plastic and rounded at the top and were about 2 inches tall at the most. Mall security told him they could be used as a weapon. I think you could do more damage with the zipper from a pair of Levi's 505 jeans. And if you can afford to get your lightsaber signed by Ewan McGregor at a Comic-Con, you can afford a stick of Old Spice. The plethora of smells in this convention center where Comic-Con was like all the rejected candle scents ever created were dumped in a toilet and someone went number 2 and didn't flush. Whiffs of mud butt like every 7 seconds. Seriously. We were in the autograph line for John Cena, and every few seconds I'd say to myself, where the hell is that awful smell coming from? You've got guys dressed in a Chewbacca costume that are almost like those one-piece fleece pajamas everyone gets at Christmas, and they're just drenched in sweat. Their BO is at an 11 out of 10. It's like when kids have pajama day at school and wear one of those one-piece fleece pajamas, then play tag in phys ed class for 30 minutes, then return to class, red in the face, soaked in perspiration, looking like they just jumped in the pool. I run into this all the time at Disney World and Six Flags theme parks. Those hot summer days, the parks just turn into a hot, steaming loaf of BO. In my last episode where we talked about the plethora of smells in a mall food court and how they mixed in with the teenage body odor in a mall arcade, and when they combined, just created this super odor that was impervious to a bar of soap. That's what theme parks can be like, especially Six Flags. I remember one time my daughter and I waiting for the train on her favorite roller coaster to return to the loading station so we could board. And when it returned, a very large oaf exited the train and left a legit puddle of butt sweat on the seat. Luckily, it was early in the day and there wasn't a whole lot of people behind us in line, so we were able to avoid that seat and move elsewhere on the train. Coming home from a theme park, I often have the same mentality as when I used to go out to bars when I was 21 years of age, when you could still smoke cigarettes in bars. I come home, strip completely naked, and want to burn all the clothes I wore that day because they smell so bad. Back then it was the cigarette smoke. Nowadays, after a day at a theme park, I can only imagine all the other butt sweat and unwashed hands my clothing has touched that day. I was thinking about some of the celebrities at the Comic-Con, like Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor, who played Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and what it's like for them to get some sweaty oaf in an oversized Boba Fett costume, cozy up next to them for a photo, and they put their arm around the fan, and that fan's back is all sweaty, and you got to do that all day. And I thought, the price you got to pay, I guess, for being one of the biggest celebrities in the world. My son and I got to meet John Cena twice at this Comic-Con, and for my son, it was an absolute dream come true to meet the biggest star in the wrestling business. My son started watching WWE in the last year and has been hooked ever since. I started taking both my kids to local wrestling events ever since they were 5 years old. My daughter has since lost interest, but my son is all about sitting front row and heckling the shit out of the bad guys, even if his insults are something like, "You're dog water," which I still don't know what that means, but On one occasion at a local show, a wrestler who was African American came out to heckle the crowd and got in my son's face. And my son, who had been yelling at him the whole match, shot up and said, "You look like a monkey who just got out of the shower." And my heart kind of stopped when he said the word monkey. And I really have no idea what he meant by, quote, one that just got out of the shower. Wouldn't that be a good thing? Like a monkey taking a shower? I think they're generally kind of smelly anyway. They're always in viral videos smelling their finger after they scratch their butt. But I had him squash the monkey comment after that and said something to him like, let's just say something next time like, "You suck." Okay? There were some things about this Comic-Con that were incredibly stressful. One was trying to get something to eat. From what was on their website, you were not allowed to bring outside food into the venue. At around 7:45 in the morning, I drank my smoothie in the car on my way to Boston. I did not eat sustainable food again until 8 p.m., which was McDonald's on the first rest stop heading west on the Mass Turnpike. And here's why. At around noontime, I was starving. My son and I made our way upstairs to the food court in the venue. And upon getting to the top, we noticed there was a line. A giant line. And when I saw this giant line, I said, "Dear God, let this not be the line for food." Unfortunately, my prayer was not answered because it was in fact the line for food. My guess is that it would have taken literally an hour to get anything to eat. I was so pissed at this point. However, I then remembered I had 4 granola bars in my backpack. I wished I had brought in something to eat because they definitely were not checking bags for food. So I scarfed down 2 Z-bars, which are kind of like Cliff bars, but the Z-bars are for kids. And my son had 1 small, chewy granola bar. He barely had anything to eat for breakfast, and I think he was just running on adrenaline with meeting John Cena. I don't think my nephew ate all day, as he was off on his own for a large portion of the day. My son had another granola bar around 4:45, just before the John Cena panel we attended. But while I enjoyed every last bit of the double quarter pounder with cheese I fired down nearly 12 hours after I had my last real meal, it was definitely not my first choice. I stopped only because it was the closest spot for a meal outside the city of the Massachusetts Turnpike. And the weird thing about this food debacle was that I had asked a couple of the vendors, where do they have food around here? And both times I got a reply of, yeah, I'm not sure. Like, not sure? How the hell are you not sure where the food is? This is the second day of the Comic-Con. How are you eating? And I later found out that some people were leaving and going to a Jimmy John's across the street. The other bigger hazard we faced was, frankly, the number of people in the event space. If there was a fire, we would have all burned to a crisp. It was unbelievably crowded. Wall-to-wall people. From what I gathered, they may have used more of the event space in last year's event, but could have possibly used a smaller portion to save money. But I'm not certain. We waited 2 hours to get John Cena's autograph. We had a slot time for 1:15 for the signing. Got in line around 1:10 and didn't get to see him until 3:35. Luckily, my son was incredibly patient with this whole process and was able to watch wrestling on my phone while we waited in line. Running on adrenaline. Something I realized while waiting in line, I realized there were people that were just getting more than 1 or 2 items signed. There were some people that paid to have 10 or more items signed. That's at least $2,000 right there. And these are people that have a memorabilia store or make their living off of that. And that was kind of annoying, I guess, because we just had one single figure to have signed, wanted to create a memory for my son. And here's Bubba having 20 items signed for his eBay store. That was kind of annoying. Anyway, we met John Cena twice the day of this Comic-Con, and he was nothing short of amazing. We did the photo op, which at these Comic-Cons are incredibly quick. You go in, say hello, shake a hand or two, pose, say thank you, and are escorted out. But John shook all our hands, smiled the entire time, and said thank you for coming. And to do that all day, to put on a smile all day, to give people what they paid for, that takes commitment. We later saw him again at the autograph portion of the Comic-Con, and he remembered my son and the retro Intercontinental title with a blue strap that we have, which is a pretty rare belt, I might add. My son wanted an autographed John Cena figure so badly. I think he was more excited about the autograph than the photo op. I found a cool 2-pack on eBay of wrestling figures which had Roman Reigns and John Cena. And I told my son that maybe someday we can get Roman Reigns to sign the other side of it too. So Cena signed the figure, and we talked about the area my son and I are from, which is not too far from where he went to college back in the day. And he said that he'd only been out that way when he was filming a movie, but thought the area where we're from was incredibly beautiful. But the most incredible thing I witnessed that day was right before we were about to get our figure signed. John was having a heart-to-heart with the young man and his family in front of us. I couldn't quite catch the gist of the conversation, but it sounded like the kid had asked Cena for advice with regards to a career goal. And you could tell that John really thought hard about his answer, but looked the kid dead in the eye and gave him some hardcore, down-to-earth advice. And he could have taken the easy way out and said, work hard. Some weak, generic advice, you know? But man, let's say he woke up in a total shit mood and you got to go out there and converse with thousands of people, and Cena smiled and shook everyone's hand and made time for everyone. And that's why he should be considered one of the greatest wrestling superstars of all time. I will say, though, Hulk Hogan will go down as the biggest wrestling icon in wrestling history, period. And I know people are going to say, but Mark, Hogan never had a 5-star match. And I say, it doesn't matter. Hogan sold tickets because he made people feel something. You can do all the high spots you want, all the acrobatics, but if the audience isn't emotionally invested in your character, then you're just another wrestler. Hulkamania was a phenomenon like people had never seen before. He made wrestling cool. He was the childhood hero for so many kids in the 80s. Train, say your prayers, take your vitamins. A simple message that just landed with kids. And yes, he had some poor choices later in life, including the surfacing of racist comments. But he's not Chris Benoit, who murdered his entire family. So his accomplishments should be celebrated, and I do think Hulkamania will live forever. One thing about John Cena is that he has really soft hands. You'd figure for someone who's thrown men over 300 pounds around a wrestling ring for 23 years to have hands like leather. But they were just the opposite. My guess is he uses some really expensive, exotic moisturizer with weird ingredients like camel spit or giraffe blood. With regards to the price of this Comic-Con experience, some of the experiences are way out of a lot of fans' price range. Comic-Con is not cheap. It's definitely not a lower middle class hobby. A lot of these hardcore fans who go are in either one of two groups. They either have a shitload of money and spend all of it on pop culture memorabilia, or they have no money and spend it all on pop culture memorabilia. I'm in the group of, I have enough money to live, but I'm not a huge collector at this point in my life. Sometimes the more stuff I have stresses me out. I'd rather have the memory, pictures and video, and maybe a hoodie or two. But sometimes the more stuff I have stresses me out. And it took me years to realize that. My nephew, who invited me to this Comic-Con, is a huge collector of memorabilia, including Funko Pop, figures, autographs, shirts. He probably dropped at least $1,500 on the day. He was able to get a ton of autographs and photo ops from some of his favorite actors from some of his favorite shows. For my son and I, we paid $200 for John Cena's autograph, and I think $200 for the photo op. And for us, that was more than enough. But it wasn't so much just wanting him to sign a wrestling toy to have on display, but rather that 30 to 45 seconds my son got to spend with one of the greatest icons in wrestling history. It's the memory of meeting someone you only dream to interact with. It's a once-in-a-lifetime moment for sure. I really would have loved to have gotten a picture with Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor, but that would have been at least another $400. And with trying to budget for other fun stuff this summer, that was definitely not in the cards. Also, the Comic-Con was not organized well in terms of the autograph signings, as I believe they oversold for the event. And from what I heard, people were at the event at least 2 hours after it closed waiting to get autographs. Thankfully, Hayden Christensen stayed and made sure that every fan got their autograph. So, good guy right there. And speaking of expensive tastes, moving on, a friend of mine shared a Facebook post from a friend of his, and I should clarify, when I asked who this person was, my friend clarified with, quote, "some dick who I accepted a friend request from years ago," unquote. And the picture within the post was that of a guitar with a price tag of $499. And the post said this, quote, "Okay, so hear me out. I have over 6,000 Facebook friends on here. And if like 499 of you each gave me $1, then I could buy this beautiful girl. I got this idea from my buddy, and I gave him $1, and he was able to get this video game player thing he wanted. So, If anyone has $1 they can spare, unquote. Then he gave his Cash App and Venmo for those who wanted to donate. I immediately got hot about this whole situation. First off, any attempt to utilize a GoFundMe, something where you are asking for money with nothing in return, should be only for something tragic. An unexpected death, a fire that consumes an entire house, a child with a life-threatening disease, something that makes a person drop to their knees and sob uncontrollably. When a musician or some crust punk band makes a GoFundMe because, hey, help fund our next recording session, it just gets me really hot. Unless it's tragic, pay for it yourself. I don't know how else to say that, but with all the awfulness and just general bad things that happen to people on a daily basis, asking people to give you money so you can do something fun is one of the most selfish things you can do as a human being. Like, you're a musician. You can sit with a guitar on the corner in some hip, earthy, crunchy downtown and open your guitar case for change like a real starving artist. I even see those people with a Venmo QR code, which my guess is people donate more than what they did back in the day using this method. Back then, it was either whatever nickels or pennies were in your pocket or nothing. Now, someone could Venmo you $5. In the time it took this guy to create that Facebook post about asking for money, he could have played a 2-minute song on the corner and possibly earned $5. This whole situation perfectly demonstrates a want from a need. If life has punched you in the face with a pair of brass knuckles and you're facing a challenge that is far greater than anything you could have ever imagined, a life event that is truly life-changing that ultimately brings you to your mental and physical limit, it is okay to ask for help. You need help. But if you're just hankering for a new Fender Strat just because you want it, you buy it. Just the audacity to ask random people to buy you something you want as opposed to a need. Have people forgotten how to beg for money? Back in the day, you at least had to find some cardboard and a Sharpie and sometimes brave cold weather. Like, this is just lazy. Sitting on your phone and posting this whiny request. Like, when you're standing on the corner, I can at least see that you're cold, your clothes are tattered, you clearly haven't showered in weeks. Make me feel sorry for your situation. If you're out here on Facebook asking people to give you money, however, in your Facebook photos you look fed, clothed, and warm, and you're asking people to give you money for something fun? You know what poor kids in Puerto Rico did who wanted to play baseball but had no money for equipment? They found a stick and a rock and they played baseball with it. So if those kids can do that, you can find a broomstick, some string, and put together a stand-up bass like you're in a Warner Brothers cartoon. You know what I did before I had a drum set? I bought a pair of drumsticks from a music store, and I sat on the edge of my bed and I air drummed for 2 years before I could finally afford a drum set. I banged on pillows, ottomans, padded chairs, whatever. That would be like if I was in 10th grade and I walked into the gymnasium during a pep rally, and I asked my entire high school population to each give me $1 so I could buy a drum set, I guarantee they would say to me in unison, "Fuck out of here." I asked my friend if he could donate a penny through Venmo, because I think that would have been like leaving a penny for a tip at a restaurant. Like, is that still a thing? Leaving a penny for a tip if you had bad service? I often donate to causes, specifically medical, like cancer research, because 1, it makes me feel good, but 2, I feel like I'm getting some good karma. I often make a donation to the Jimmy Fund, which funds child cancer research. Look, it's kids who are incredibly sick. If you're going to donate to anything, donate to that cause before donating to a political candidate or someone that just wants a new guitar. Anyway, thank you for taking this ride with me and listening to this episode. If you'd like to write in, you can at whyarewestilldoingthispodcast@gmail.com. whyarewestilldoingthispodcast@gmail.com. I have some really fun projects and interviews I'm in the process of, so please stay tuned. And thank you to those who have listened to my last 3-part series on retro video gaming with my friend Jesse Littlejohn. He and I have a really big project that we're looking to do in the future, so please stay tuned. You can also follow me on TikTok at Why Are We Still Doing This PC? That's all one word. Why Are We Still Doing This PC? That's all one word on TikTok. So please come back in 2 weeks, and we will see you then. Thanks. Bye.